creative mind not only wonders in beauty or artistic outcomes, it also travels into understanding complex problems and questions that may have been addressed by other generations in the past. Like, why do we behave like we do? Why can't we take care of our planet? It took me time to understand that sustainability requires so many things to be real. But most important, I now understand that it needs people that are prepared to confront difficulties in a society that needs to be encouraged to take care of the world we all share.
Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States. I'm here a master's in fashion design student at CSVPA. My background more recently was as a pattern maker for a sportswear company in Minnesota. And I also worked for a canvas and leather goods, soft goods company doing a lot of bags, patterning bags, and also sewing them. So, my last 5 years is very much in sort of the technical area of apparel design. I went to a technical school to get a 2-year degree in apparel technologies from Minneapolis College in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'd really like to work with fashion brands, like to work with their in-house pattern makers to develop zero or minimal low waste kind of solutions. Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm really into kind of what's evolving out of sustainable practices. I don't use that term lightly. It's sustainable before you actually make it. Let's put it that way. Like a zero waste pattern, which is something I'm into, zero waste clothing. It's often zero waste in theory. The pattern itself is zero waste. What you do with it could very well not be. Yeah, so what we have here is a zero waste pattern. This is half of the pattern. So each piece in a garment is made up of smaller pieces that are sewn together. This here is one half of the front.
As Abby was explaining how zero waste patterns function, I remembered a research reference, the conference of Dr. Kirsi Nihinimaki with the topic Time as Design Element, where I got more sense of the concept of why zero waste patterns, as Abby stated, are difficult to be accepted by brands. And that is because the industry demands the production of designs fast for impulse consumption. But in order to be sustainable, they need to be produced slow, with conscience and quality. Regarding what Abby was explaining, a zero-waste pattern is considered a design technique that maximizes fabric usage, minimizing or eliminating textile waste during the production process. In other words, you plan your design with the calculations in order to use all of the fabric you cut for each piece.
Becomes scraps, so that's how much fabric is wasted in the cutting process because of the design of traditional patterns. And so zero waste patterns kind of recoup that 15% that's lost. And I should say in certain circumstances, the fabric waste is quite a bit more than that.
Moving towards a circular economy means taking a system perspective on fashion where all actors are included. Designers, producers, manufacturers, suppliers, business people, and even consumers.
And that's why this hasn't really been popularized, because it's difficult, and it's not really difficult math, it's just a lot of playing with numbers.
Our planet is being swamped in clothes, with some 56 million tons sold every year. The number sold in Europe has doubled since the turn of the millennium.
Today, the textile industry is valued at about $3 trillion.
Even though Abby is referring to the difficulty of the calculation of numbers in the zero waste patterns, there are a lot more that we need to consider in order to have a future. For example, let's look at some basic digits on water consumption. Cotton is often considered the base of supply chain in the textile industry, being the most widely used and fundamental natural fiber in the textile manufacturing process. You need 8,000 liters of irrigated water to produce a pair of jeans. Multiply that for all of the jeans produced daily around the world. It's unbalanced.
Fast fashion is the commerce of very inexpensive clothing that you are expected or you are ready to replace very rapidly.
Since when have we lost track of how we process the quality-related decisions to acquire new products? I found a TED Talk from the University of Mississippi titled Fast Fashion, Effect on People, Planet, and You by Patrick Woodyard that explained how statistically we have enrolled in a consumption cycle that is affecting everyone.
When it comes to you and me, the concept of fast fashion and these cheap prices make us believe that we're actually saving money, that it's good for our wallets. But actually all that's happening is that we're buying more. Since the early 1990s, average consumption has increased by 500%. And what's interesting about this is that while our closets may have gotten a little bit bigger since the early 90s, I don't think that they're physically 5 or 6 times the square footage that they once were, are they? And I'd like to suggest that that is because the value of the products that we're buying, the quality of the products we're buying has gone right down with the cost.
You know, they may sell a lot of the particular type of coat, like their number one selling coat, they might want to do like a version of that that's minimal or low waist, as sort of a way for brands to kind of transition into a more efficient and eco-friendly model. So I think a lot of brands are kind of struggling with how do they kind of do that first project, how do they even get started, and I'd like to help designers translate their vision into a lower waist version of it.
It's important to understand the will that we need for this type of improvement. Abby studied philosophy and math, and she applied that knowledge in the difficult task of implementing patterns that do not harm the environment. Now let's see some of this practice.
So this is the jacket I made with the zero waste pattern. This piece is a great example of something that might be thrown away otherwise. And I used it here as a closure.
Which piece, like all the neck or?
Yeah, the triangular pieces.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. And this coat doesn't have a lot of extra parts. In fact, it has fewer parts than a normal jacket. Because when I'm making a zero waste pattern, I try not to have a bunch of extra parts because that is generally what happens, is you have little scraps and you try to use them and suddenly you have all these little things going on. All the white parts show the scraps. So these are presumably, the same type of garment that's being cut out of the same fabric in different sizes. That's why they're different colors. And yeah, with traditional pattern making, your shapes don't fit together, they don't interlock. This doesn't have like an extra center back seam, which is frequent. It does have 3 pieces in the sleeve. That would be like an extra seam there, which is not typical, although you do see that. And in this case, it adds to the functionality.
Zero waste pattern making is a full-time commitment that requires experience, research, and passion. We as professionals should embrace our careers with the same effort as Abby does.
In your pocket. And I chose to put it on the inside instead of the outside. But this pocket could have been turned into any number of things. And that's part of the creative process. You have a piece and you think, well, what's going to add the most value? And in my case, I think, what is going to look natural.
We now have learned that zero-waste pattern design is an industrial best practice that is sustainable. Another that we could do is upcycling, which consists in taking old, discarded, or unused materials or products to transform them into something new and useful. Both practices rely on material efficiency and sustainable design. They contribute positively to reducing the environmental footprint, stimulate consumer awareness, and encourages designers to think creatively and innovatively.
My project here right now is an upcycling project. I'm taking a big stack of windbreakers, I'm breaking them down, and I'm rebuilding them into a big ball gown, a sporty, huge, massive, fun gown. I'm taking them apart, and the project is to use every part of these. I've already measured all of the pieces so that I can kind of compare it to the measurements of my model and think of different ways for me to use all of the parts. I've done some mood boarding, and I have some vague concept ideas kind of related to tents and sails and hot air balloons. I mean, these shapes that inflate. I'm kind of like interested in that to see how I can create volume. One thing I was going to do today is compare my model's measurements to the mannequins we have here to see, what
Can you
is.
see?
Yeah. So I measured this gal recently. I took kind of the primary measurements you need, the hips, waist, bust.
We could spend hours sharing information of how the process works, how it could be implemented or improved. This video is not meant to scold businesses, industries, or employees, but more of a call to creatives, professionals, entrepreneurs to work together in finding a solution on how to make circular and sustainable economy possible. I captured this example that represents one professional that by all means committed to follow this virtuo's path, anticipating to inspire a new generation that desires a recovered planet.